Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. Gentleman joining us today, Derek Sloan, has a background that I'm really interested in learning, just as you and the audience are going to hear about it as we go. Derek has one of his ventures called A Bridge, which gets involved in leadership and organizational training, but that's not necessarily where he started out. He began his journey someplace completely different, looking to provide help and guidance to people in need to make a difference in their world. Derek, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Gary, thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this.
So, Derek, take me back a ways. Growing up, at some point, how did you decide, or did you know, that your place was to be kind of in service of others, to help people get through what they're trying to do? How did that all develop for you and lead you into this present state of leadership development, organizational development, and all the rest of it?
What a great question to kick things off. It's fun being on this side of, I'm usually the one interviewing or inquiring about others. And so I would say the reason that's a great question for me is it was not clear to me real time. It became more clear in retrospect. And I think back to my early memories and recollections, and I was a kid who there was definitely a lot of change constantly happening in my home life. And I think that there's a lot of different ways that change can impact us as adults, let alone children who don't have the perspective or maybe even some of the understanding or the capacity to understand. And so what I found myself doing is that change left me asking a lot of questions. And so asking questions as far as like, it could be basic practical things like, how long are we going to be in this house? How long am I going to be at this school? And so I just think I became a question asker because all the change just kicked a lot of questions up in my mind that was racing and really just trying to understand and make sense of things. And
so let me just hold you there for 1 second, because I find this to be really interesting. Whatever the changes were, kids grow up, we change, obviously, we change physically, we change mentally, our situations can change. But oftentimes, more often than not, we just kind of go along with it for a while, and we don't do a lot of reflecting back and trying to get to the why of what's happening. Do you recall at what age you started to get into questions about why these things were
pretty
occurring?
early? I've always been. I think some of my earliest memories were annoying adults around me with my questions. That's pretty good.
Why is that sky blue?
Yeah. Why? Why? Which has made me a great therapist.
Dad?
Trying to dig into some things. But I think I was designed, wired, created to be inquisitive, and I've found the evolution. I think early on in my life, it was out of my own curiosity, but that has led me to deeper understandings in most situations, and I think having that curiosity has never left me. It got to some points in my life, later in life, where I started asking questions, and then I realized how good it felt when my inquisitive self or the questions that I'm asking could be in the benefit of others, whether it be helping me explain something to my younger sister, who was several years younger than me. And the more inquisitive or the questions that I could ask that she didn't have words for, that could become a discussion and a bridge for a connection with her, and also saw just how much peace that brought her. And
So
you kind
what
of
you were doing was it seems almost Socratic in nature that,
for
we're going to find the answers within ourselves. They may not all be the same, but it's really about asking those questions that
for
can help
sure.
trigger those thoughts to get the proper answers. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I think that inherently leaning into curiosity is all I was doing. And I think when you're a kid who doesn't have a fully formed frontal lobe, when you are again, you haven't had the creativity and that part of your brain stepped on and overlooked, and you're just left to wonder. I think that curiosity came really easy to me, and I think again that's I've found ways that's always allowed me to continue to benefit myself and then start to benefit my family and even beyond that. I remember getting pulled into the principal's office for a good reason in high school, and it's because I was a captain of my basketball team, and I'm in Kentucky. Basketball matters, right? So
Oh yeah.
I'm the captain of the basketball team, and I was like, it was my senior year, and I remember thinking like, we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the summer, into camp, into these tournaments, like, but it's not showing up on the court. And again, it became something else I was getting curious about, and so I wrote an open letter to the team, and so at that time I had to go to the library to print something. I didn't have a printer in my house. And I went and I wrote up a letter and I put it in everyone's locker because we were going to be coming and going. And I wanted them to be able to see my thoughts. And then whenever I saw them again at practice, they had a bit of time to process some of the questions that I had in there. So they couldn't be like processing it real time and it wouldn't generate discussion. And so I took it very serious. I was like, hey, here's some key questions I have, why we're underperforming as a team, why it's not translating to in the win column for us. And the principal somehow caught wind of that or saw a copy of it or something, called me in the office. I didn't know what I was getting called in the office for. And he laid the letter on the desk and says, tell me about this. It's still at that point I was like, is this a paper I turned in? I turned it around and it was a letter I wrote my team. And he just instilled in me, that was my final year there. And he just said, like, commended me on my leadership, my courage. And again, at that point in my life, I felt like he was someone else who spoke into continue being curious, ask the questions. It's in the
What was the
service and
impact of
benefit of
that
others.
statement when you got called in? What was the impact of having that external affirmation
It was
from
huge for
someone
me.
in a supervisory role?
Yeah, it was huge for me. And this is someone I think he had been there maybe a couple of years, and I had another principal prior to that, and he was pretty introverted, and so I didn't really know him super well, and so again, that's why I was kind of blindsided going into that conversation. But I think it carried a ton of weight for me because it was also someone who, it would have been different if it was my head coach who pulled me in because it's someone who knew
Sure.
me that I'm talking to that I'm in their world multiple hours every day. And this is someone on the outside looking in that I like the fact that he saw that or spoke into that, he wasn't on my radar at all. But again, I think the words carried weight because like, hey, this is someone who is making these observations and making this claim from a distance, which to me made it in a weird way, uh, I think more profound.
Had you decided to pursue this as a professional line of study prior to that, where you are now? Or was that kind of instrumental in saying, hey, I should really focus on this if I can have this kind of impact with someone that doesn't know
No,
me that well?
yeah, I think it came before that. I just think that was another um, accelerator into it or affirmation of, hey, I know whatever I do, whatever hat I'm wearing, uh, there's got to be people involved and people who are wanting to grow and change. And if I can play a part in that, that's just going to help me grow and change.
As you were growing up, especially through high school, were other kids coming to you and saying, "Hey, Derek, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, or I'm kind of stuck here or stuck there. What do you think about it?" Were you
Yeah, I
that
think
guy?
so. I think on the basketball court, I kind of held that. That was kind of my world, to be honest. It was an escape. It allowed me to go places, to get on a plane, to get on a bus, to go to a couple cities over. That was a big deal when you're from Eastern Kentucky and you didn't get to go a lot of places. And so I think I had some of that built in on the sports side of things. I think outside of sports, I was more insecure. I was trying to find my way. Am I I love laughing and humor and have kind of always been a little bit quick on my feet conversationally. And so I think that, but some of my insecurities, I wasn't sure my identity enough. I wasn't secure in myself enough. I was more of a observer, peacemaker, off the court. On the court, I think it allowed me to wear a different hat. I didn't have to talk as much. I could demonstrate. I could show that I'm not the slowest, or I'm not the fastest, I should say. I'm not the fastest on the team, but that doesn't mean I can't have the most amount of rebounds because of hustle. It's like there's things that behaviorally I could do on a basketball court. I think off the court, I was trying to find my feet, so to speak.
Did you stay local in Kentucky for school or did you go elsewhere when you graduated?
Yeah, I stayed local. I ended up getting a full ride, so that was a hard thing to turn down. So academically, and so I went to a small private university, and but then got the option in my studies to get out of the classroom and do internships. And I got there at the tail end of uh, this program where I could go and take an internship, and it would take a class off my list that I would have to take. And I was
Sure.
like, I'm gonna take
Did you
advantage
know a
of
lot of the
that.
people in the school with
I
you?
didn't know anybody.
Okay, so this is what I want to go to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you were looked at in a certain way. People had a perception of you. You were pretty well known in your school. And now you end up going someplace where no one knows you at all. Did
Mhm.
you feel a sense of being able to reinvent yourself as to how you believed you wanted to be perceived as opposed to the Derek they knew in high school?
I don't think so. I think um I think I was I think I was secure enough in, like, I didn't need to pretend to be something I wasn't.
No,
I
I'm
don't
not
think I
saying
was.
pretend, but we all grow, right? So
For
I
sure,
guess
sure.
another way I would phrase it would be, and I know I'm prying a little bit, but there's
Go
a
for it.
reason for this. If we asked some of the juniors and seniors in your undergrad work to describe you and their interactions with you versus some of the juniors and seniors in your high school, how similar or dissimilar would those descriptions be about you?
I would say probably I had deeper connections in high school than college, where I was out in the field so much in college. Like I said, internships, and I commuted to school so I could save additional money. So I would commute 40 minutes to school and take classes back to back as I could, so I wouldn't have to make multiple trips, sleep in the back of my car, and then I would leave. And so I commuted so much, and so I didn't develop deep, meaningful relationships in college like I had in high school. And in the town I grew up in, everyone knew each other, really small
Sure.
community. College was a little different. I commuted, I was in and I was out, and then I was doing internships in, different states and going away for months at a time. And so it was just different, when it comes to the school experience for those reasons.
As you were doing the internships and you were traveling, and these people didn't know you, but they're reflecting back on the interactions that you're having, any big aha moments along that path that you can recall where you may have said something you may have thought, you said it 5 times before, but with that one person, it was a game changer for them. What I'm trying to get to is you're clearly different now than you were in high school. You're secure in what you do. You've got a variety of licenses, which are not easy to get. And people are completely reliant on you. You got to have it's not an easy lift to do what you do. What I'm going for is at what point did you begin to evolve or understand that this was your path, that this was where you were going to go?
I think when you start to see transformation in people, and I think I go back to those settings with my sister, and when I see a different, almost like an exhale, of someone who maybe has a different understanding, or maybe they have at least a lens to interpret hardship or challenge. Like that's always felt gratifying and fulfilling for me. And I think my journey has been early on, before my licenses, when I was first starting my career, when I'm in mentor roles, in volunteer kind of type roles that I've done for a long time, or you know, my first few jobs, I always found myself being on the listening end of people who were contemplating challenging seasons. And I think a few of those repetitions of being in that, having to get to a spot in my own development where that doesn't mean, because I'm on the listening end, doesn't mean I have to be the answer bearer. That's a big shift early on. You feel like the weight, you talk about the heavy lift. The heavy lift it's even heavier when we feel like I have to be the one to give them the answer to help them overcome this. And sometimes it's just giving them a different perspective, or just giving them an ear and not saying a whole lot. But whatever it is, however I've been used along that journey, it always, again, constant affirmation. And it wasn't always easy and it wasn't always perfect. I'm not trying to paint that picture, but it's been very affirming that in my wiring, I could be in a really tough conversation with people that has a very, there's not much, the prognosis isn't good. And I've just felt very in the moment and content and at peace in that. As gross, as hard, as challenging as it is, I felt like this is kind of what I was made to do and who I was made to be.
Does that sense of inner peace come, do you think, from being very much in touch with who you are at your core, a healer, someone that wants to leave it better than you found it? Or are you looking at it more on I would say, a quantitative fashion, that if I let this person talk enough, they're going to find their own answer. I know it's bad, but let's just see where things develop. So I guess my question is it at this point, is it more intuitive, or are there certain clinical techniques that you're going to consider in these tough conversations?
It's very context based. I would say the thing that propelled me most into clinical work, because I had a career prior to that. I felt like I had got to the end of my training and felt like I have these, I had this ability to develop relationships and trust with people, and to get to the end of my training and skill when I'm like, hey, if I learned a bit more, I could help them a bit more. And so that really did leave me into, hey, I need to understand more about mental health, because a lot of the conversations that comes up or came up, and I didn't always have a lens for it, and I didn't want to wade into waters I wasn't qualified to 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 support someone in. And so that's when, okay, well, if there's something I can do, again, to be curious about, to help someone further, I'm willing to do it. I'll go back to grad school. It wasn't a full ride this time, so that was tough.
Rarely is in grad school.
Yeah, yeah. So that
Um,
was that, again, my curiosity of like, hey, I think I can develop new skills that are going to help me. And then that's really what set me on introducing the clinical skills into my
among the various certifications that you have, two of them stand out as kind of being kind of at opposite points, but I don't think they are. The work you do in organizational uh, consulting vis-a-vis trauma therapy. How do those two things connect?
yeah.
What have you learned from one in dealing with the other?
I think with organizational consulting, there's a lot of different corporate words for mental health issues. And I think HR's done a really good job of ironing out what can and can't be said or done or addressed for obvious. And I get it. I get it. I would say that they overlap a lot more than I even initially realized. And I'll give you an example. And the data speaks to this all the time. Even in the last 5 to 10 years, it came out that, the impact that managers have on their people is to the same level as a spouse or significant other. And it's a manager has more an increased impact on people on their team more than a doctor or a therapist.
Hmm.
So when you think
Mm.
about, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Please continue.
When you think about caring for people, trauma looks like a lot of different. There's some people that would say, in my colleagues of mine, who would say everything's trauma. That's debatable. I think when you think of like the clinical definition and so forth, but I would just say the amount of keeping it, I think even in a more general level of just mental well-being than trauma specific, just understanding that, man, people are spending most of their time at work, and they are giving a lot of themselves to organizations that maybe aren't aren't taking intentional steps to truly cultivate environments where they're going to thrive. And so when I think about my work in the corporate space, I was on a call this morning, and I'm challenging high level leaders on certain areas that are fundamental for people to thrive. And I think to be able to bring that lens into the corporate space, and I love it because there's something that always resonates. It almost gives organizations permission sometimes to be like, oh, okay. Again, everything's been a little bit sterilized or desensitized, or again, the corporate language on it versus mental well-being and psychological needs.
Do you see trauma as being kind of in the eye of the person that thinks they've been traumatized, or are there clear definitions of it that you work with?
Trauma is very subjective. That's why you hear stories of there could be two twins in the same car wreck. Maybe they were even sitting on the same side of the vehicle, one in the front seat, one in the back seat, that gets hit by the car. And one of them, 6 to 12 months later, is clinically traumatized, and the other one's not. The other one went back to school the next day, worked the next day, hanging out with friends. They have similar genetic markers. They had similar environmental experiences, yet the outcome was different. And so it's
How do
really
you,
interesting. Go
yeah,
ahead.
how do you differentiate that?
I think there's a lot of
Why?
reasons. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think it's the same reason that two kids can grow up in the same home. I talked about how my curiosity and the questions that I had. I had a brother 18 months. I have a brother 18 months older than me who isn't like that. He has another set of. We grew up in the same home, went through the same changes, had a lot of the same kind of things. I think there's personality factors. I think there's different experiences based on personality types that cultivate resiliency in people. I think social connection. You think of like, okay, maybe those twins in those cars, one of them does have a core group of people they can go and talk honestly and openly to about that experience. And the other one maybe is in the middle of maybe they just moved schools. They don't have a solidified friend group yet. Maybe they don't have the social structure support to process what happened. So trauma can also be something that goes unprocessed. And so I
You
think
know, in
sometimes,
so in past in World War II, they call it battle fatigue, and now we add the word trauma to it, and it's PTS or
yeah.
PTSD. There was a movie that came out quite a while ago, uh, starring Jim Carrey. So if you're into comedy, I'm sure you know him. The
Hmm.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
If you remember that, he was trying to get over a traumatic breakup. And the reason it caught my attention was I caught an article in the New York Times Sunday magazine about experiments that were being done. It might have been at Yale to try and find certain medications that would prevent the anchoring of emotional memories because what they found was, and I'm interested in your opinion on this, emotional memories tend to anchor without a time clock. That traumatic memories, once they're there, they're there. They don't necessarily go away. So they were working with different types of medications which would prevent that area of the brain from being receptive to those longer term memories. And what they found out was that it actually prevented not just the traumatic memories, but also the really happy memories, stuff you
Mhm.
really wanted to remember, couldn't get anchored either. I'm not sure where the study went, but when you're dealing with someone that has been exposed to something that by any way, shape, or form is traumatic, war by way of example, what's the methodology to try and move that out of the present for them? How do you work with that?
Yeah. There's different clinical angles to approach it, and some of it depends on your modalities that you're trained in, and honestly, whenever you go through your clinical training, one of the early questions you get is how do people change? And some people approach it more from a cognitive standpoint. Some people more from a somatic standpoint with the body, physical. Some people it might be more family systems or emotional side of things. And what I have found, and I think any clinician, as you start to get into it and start to have your practical experiences, you evolve and adapt and figure out where you see the most change for people. And I find that when it comes to trauma or emotional disturbance, many people who in the onset try to address it from strictly a cognitive approach from step one, it's more challenging to find progress and healing.
Hmm.
And the reason being, when you think of like in a cognitive approach to a traumatic experience, trauma by nature shows up in the body.
Yeah.
Stress, fear, anxiety. It has you can see physical markers of that differently than some of the other things we diagnose and treat. When it comes to these kind of experiences, it shows up in the body, and oftentimes it is embedded in us. Those traumatic experiences is in us. If we were in a car wreck, we may see a car coming on. I can't ride in the passenger seat anymore because when I do, my heart rate goes up and I start to have an anxiety response. And because it's in there, changing my thought about this in the moment as a step one doesn't address the body is already 5 miles down the road and already responding as if you're in the woods with the bear again. And so I find that taking a more deal with the body first and the brain second is how I approach it.
Interesting.
So how do I help someone get regulated? Because what tends to happen when our body is still unregulated and we try to do cognitive processing or cognitive behavioral strategies, the prefrontal cortex, where all higher level thinking is and logic and rationality, it turns off.
Yeah.
So why do I want to have I'm going to be processing this from a cognitive standpoint with 5% of my prefrontal cortex. And I'm not going to be super productive. I'm not going to be able to be logical. I'm not going to be able to really think in a rational manner because I haven't dealt with the body yet. So regulating the body first, getting it to a calm state. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Exposure therapies, self-regulation, grounding techniques, mindfulness. There's a lot of different avenues to explore that. And people respond differently to that. But that's always my approach. How do I get the body regulated? And how freeing that is for a patient coming in who, hey, I've been doing all these things, cognitively, it's not working. And I'm able to say, yeah, here's why. And so they're like, oh, I'm
Derek,
not dumb or I'm not. Yeah.
yeah, I really applaud what you're doing. I think it's so valuable. I wish we had more time. I'd love to have you on again. There's so many things we can dig into, and your range of expertise is unusual. But I think a lot of that comes back to what we first talked about, which is your thirst for knowledge and curiosity, which I think is the world could use a lot more of that
Mm.
these days. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. I know we're a little pressed for time, but hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah. I would love that. Thank you, Gary.
Great. Been chatting with Derek Sloan. You can find him at abridge.com,
Abridge Leadership.
abridgeleadership.com,
Yep. And the Mental
LinkedIn.
Stillness Podcast.
Beautiful. I definitely going to check out the podcast. Really interesting stuff. Thank you so much. for joining us today here on If the Public Only Knew.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.